Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the planning board meeting for September 20th, 2022. Before we get started, I have some announcements to make. This open meeting of the planning board is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law on July 16, 2022. All members of the planning board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The act allows the planning board to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bill Pierce?
Here.
Amy Paretsky?
Here.
Millie Milton?
Here.
Anthony Zaitin?
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Lori Connors?
Here.
Fred Litchfield?
Here.
Great. Ground rules for the meeting. Chair will invite each speaker on the agenda by name to make a presentation and speak to their application. Participants will provide their full name and hold until their name is called. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phone or computer when not speaking and to speak clearly in a way that generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait until the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to comments of others do so through the chair, taking care to identify themselves. Each vote taken by the board will be conducted by roll call vote. For public comment by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Please note part of your number will be visible. By Zoom, click raise hand on the bottom of your screen and wait to be recognized. The chair will ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, the chair will call on each by name and afford approximately 3 minutes to each. Let's see. For this evening, the first item on our agenda is an executive session. Is there a motion from the board to go into executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 3, litigation regarding pending land use litigation, ABU Construction, Inc. and KA Realty, Inc. versus the Town of Northborough and Northborough Planning Board, Worcester Superior Court, Civil Action Number 1985 CV00178. Due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding this matter is in an open meeting, may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the board and town. Once the executive session is over, the planning board will return to open session.
I have a quick question because I wasn't on the board when that applicant came forth. Do I go into executive session for this?
Yes.
Okay. So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Bill?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Millie?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
And carries an aye. So at this point, the planning board will move into executive session. We will come back to the public meeting at the close of executive session. We have several public hearings this evening, which will be held after this portion. So please check back or stay on the line. Thanks very much. Oh, adjourn. I don't adjourn. I don't need to adjourn this section of the meeting, correct? Got it. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Okay, I think we have the full board back and Ms. Connors as well. Jim, are we okay to go in terms of cable and whatnot?
I believe in terms of cable, yes, and you're live on YouTube, so you're all set on my end.
Okay, great.
Yes, check in from NCAP. We're all set.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Why don't we get back to the public agenda? Thank you for everyone for holding. Next on our agenda is the continued public hearing for 100 Barefoot Road, special permit and special permit with site plan approval. It sounds like we have a request to continue for that.
Yes, we did receive an email from Vito Colonna of Cornerstone Engineering this afternoon. Following up on our call, please accept this email as a request to continue tonight's planning board public hearing for 100 Barefoot Road to the October 4th meeting date. So we can accommodate him on that agenda at 6:10 p.m.
Okay, and Millie, this is the hearing that you recuse yourself from traditionally, so I'll exclude you from the motion to continue. Just so the board's clear, Lori, it sounds like we did receive some of the additional materials like the landscape materials and the photometrics we were waiting for, and also that they are in fact an intermittent stream, so they will need to work with Concom further. Those are kind of the things that are still in play.
Yes, so we did, they have addressed the lion's share of the comments that Fred had and that I had. The only outstanding issue to date has to do with the photometric plan. However, we received the material so late that there wasn't enough time to complete a draft decision for discussion for tonight.
Okay.
So that's the primary reason to ask for the continuance to the next meeting.
Okay. Okay, great. Is there a motion to continue the public hearing for 100 Barefoot Road special permit with site plan approval to October 4th at 6:10 p.m.?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Anthony,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Terry's an aye, and Millie has recused herself. So it is just the 4 members. So that hearing has been continued to October 4th at 6:10 p.m. It is at least 6:20, so we can go on to the next hearing. We are moving on to the continued public hearing for 75 Ridge Road, special permit common driveway and special permit with site plan review. So if we have any participants in the audience that need to come over, let's see. Looks like Scott, oops, are you pulling them over, Jim? Or I think I can do it here too. Damon. Let's see, anyone else from your team? Damon or Scott? Is Ben on your team?
Yes, Ben too.
Okay. Anyone else?
Just 3 of us.
Okay, great. Let's see. For some reason, I think Ben, well, oops, there you are. There you go. Okay. Okay, great. Welcome back. I think when we last briefly met, you had opted to continue just based on some of the conditions. So we do have I think what I believe to be the latest copy of that. I'm just going to pull it up here. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to focus on or discuss during this meeting from the applicant side?
Sure. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board and staff. For the record, my name is Scott Cameron with the Moore and Cameron Group, 25 Canosa Ave in Haverhill, Massachusetts. You heard from Damon already and Ben, who are the applicants. And I guess at your discretion, I'm happy to do I can do a brief presentation. I know you have a full agenda and just highlight some of the things we've been working on since our first meeting. Or we can jump out, I'll go at your discretion. I do feel, maybe a brief update would be helpful.
Yeah, that would actually. Go right ahead, please.
Good thing. Would it be okay for me to share my screen?
Sure, go ahead.
Let me know if that came up in front of you.
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. So we had our initial meeting a few months ago now, and since that time, We have been working on addressing comments and input received from your board, the Conservation Commission, the public, through both things we've heard at the public meetings and some written comments, as well as working with staff. And I see Lori and Fred are on the call tonight. Vincent from the Conservation Commission has also been involved with this. And I did want to start off by saying that hats off to a very thorough and well done review process by them. We always do hope that we through this process come out at the end with a better project, and I really feel like we got there. And as you recall, just refresh your memory, this is the site at 75 Ridge Road. It's a very unique property in that it does sit in this peninsula on Bartlett Pond, and it's been relatively it's been intensely used for a long period of time for I guess what you describe as a residential use, but there's 7, 8 or so somewhat standing dwellings in the property, extensive trash, debris, filling, dumping. You have paved driveways, you have open cesspools, and through part of our process here, one of the more important aspects of this project is how we're actually going to implement cleaning up this site, doing so in a manner that respects the sensitive environmental placement of the property with respect to the wetlands bylaw and the state act, as well as the watershed district. And I did include, and we spent a lot of time on this plan, which is really about that first step. And I did include some pictures here that you can observe, just getting a feel for, kind of the existing condition of the property in certain areas, so you can see what we're going to be up against, in demoing these structures, removing the material. This one in particular, you can see old foundation ruins with trash everywhere, and this is right on the edge of the pond. Just homes filled with trash. This one was actually still inhabited as of 2019 when we first started looking at this property. This is over closer to Ridge Road, but there was a tremendous amount of effort put into this, and you will, if you had had a chance to go through these plans, latest dated August 25th, you'll see we've added in a lot of detail here on a construction sequence. This talks about the 0 to 25 foot setback, which is a critical zone along the water frontage that's also protected under the conservation regulations. We also go to means and methods here, construction sequencing, and all of this aimed at ensuring that that it is clearly spelled out what you can and cannot do, especially within this 25-foot zone. And really, I guess the simplest way to distill that down is we don't want to go into the 25-foot zone other than for removing the existing debris and structures that are in that. So there's restrictions on bringing even heavy equipment into that zone. The apparatus needs to be approved by, in this case, we expect probably Vincent would be the lead on that. Fred or Lori may want to be involved with those conversations as well. There's provisions in here. They have to hire an arborist, come in and evaluate all the trees, make sure situations where we have, you can see just the trash and debris. This is a relatively easy one, but there's trees growing up and in a lot of this, and we can't even really see a lot of what is there. I've poked around through some of the vegetation and the leaf litter, and there's what looks like a forest floor. You scratch away the leaves and everything on top, and there's more trash under that. So marking out trees, protecting them, silt controls, all in close communication with the town, and really putting a lot of emphasis on, the town isn't overseeing this work. At the end of the day, the applicant needs to oversee it, but the town is signing off. The staff are signing off on this to make sure it is all done in keeping with protecting this buffer. So that was where a lot of this effort was put in. We also went through in great detail, adjusting the site plan. We pulled the homes back away from the 25 and the 35-foot setbacks, which are conservation setbacks, But your board does look at the environmental aspects of these applications as well. But we pulled that back. We reduced the impervious footprint from the original plans. We adapted the stormwater management systems to more clearly spell out the types of plants and things that we're going to put in there. I'll go through that in a moment. We fine-tuned easement areas, snow storage. We added a hydrant as well as a light over that hydrant so it's clearly visible. We did adjust also the lot lines to make sure that we're meeting the zoning requirements, and this is a lot split by the groundwater overlay district. Area 1 and 2 actually split this lot 3 here, so we did some adjustments to the lot lines to make sure that we have the full area and frontages for that. Again, just the grading plan. I won't go through the grading in a lot of detail here. I'll show that on another sheet, but we did pull back the grading. We really went through the fine-tooth comb, try to make this as efficient as possible. There are two main stormwater management areas. In the back here, you have an area that's going to pick up roof runoff, yard runoff, and it's a bioretention basin, very shallow, intended to blend into the landscape of the yards. And then the central part of the property in the middle of the turnaround here, you have another bioretention. This is actually one system, even though it's on either side of the retention area. They're connected by a pipe underneath the road that's laid level. And again, this is to provide the stormwater management for all the common driveway and all the paved driveway areas of the property. And a lot of this was on the original plans, but we've gone through and fine-tuned a lot of this. I'm skipping ahead. This is the sheet L2, the landscaping plan. And you'll see in here too, a lot more detail on the types of plants. We're not just seeding these basins with a wetland mix. There's actually a wetland mix on the bottom. There's a different type of mix on the sides because that's different growing conditions. One is more wet, and one is a little more dry, kind of hybrid upland. We've also included a lot of plantings in this area, so it's not just seeded. These are actually bioretention areas, so we want plants growing in there. And we did work with, again, staff on going through this and vetting it. For example, the stormwater handbook recommends we use bark mulch, wood chips to line these basins. In my experience, wood floats. So when these fill with water, you get this soupy mess of floating wood chips. We eliminated all that and instead are seeding that. So we have a lot more plant root uptake, which is a great form of treating the stormwater runoff from this driveway area. And again, just clarifying more on the plans here, darker green here. This is all existing forested area along Ridge Road that will remain, where we have to come in and do demolition and kind of clean this up. There would be a little bit of tree loss in the frontage here, but we're replacing that with a very extensive planting here, mainly evergreen, just to make sure that what goes back is more or less the same view quarter that's on Ridge Road now. We are proposing street trees along the road. These are sugar maples, again, trees between the dwellings to kind of demarcate kind of the edges of the yards that follow the lot lines. But we're doing that with trees instead of, I guess I can't say that people won't put in fences, but the idea here is to try to put those natural vegetative markers in those areas along the lot lines. And then again, this darker, again, the kind of the army green along the edge of the pond here. Again, that's area that's protected, that's going to be cleaned up and restored. So really, you can see the very extensive perimeter around this property that will be protected. All these natural existing trees will be protected and stay. So the work is really focused on the inside of the property. We do have to, in full disclosure, you will see the trees in the middle of the property in more of the lighter green area. Those will have to be cleared. The reason for this, there's a lot of reasons for it. But mainly, we want to make sure that the septic systems meet Title V. We have to create and build up the site to get those 5 feet above the water table, and then you have another 3 feet or so to finish grade. So 8 feet above the water table. So we've got to bring the site up to make sure we can meet those very important vertical setbacks. And also for the stormwater management, we want to make sure we provide vertical separation of groundwater. In this case, we're going to end up with 6 to 8 feet of separation from the bottom of the stormwater basins to the water table, which is coincident with Bartlett Pond. generally, if you can think about the water level of the pond is the water level of the groundwater in this little peninsula. So we paid a lot of attention to that. And again, just there's been a lot of the effort has been technical in nature. I appreciate the board's patience and going back and forth. There were a lot of iterations on this, as you can see from the plan revisions, but we've gone through with a lot of effort to get this plan really polished. And I think I'm very happy with it. I think the applicant's very happy with it, and we're looking forward to executing a very well thought out plan here for the project. So I'll turn it back to you. I don't know if you have any questions about the work we've done since the first meeting, but happy to answer those for you.
Okay, board members, any questions from you on the revisions here or anything else? I just had a question. So regarding the septic, I know you brought that up. So this is still something that still has to go to the Board of Health for approval. It hasn't been approved yet, but you're working with them, or that's part of this plan. I suppose it's a condition that it.
Yes, it's a great question. So we've actually already filed our application for soil testing, and sequentially, we typically go through your board, conservation, the zoning board, but the public hearing processes first, and then the Board of Health is always the next step. In this case, we'll also have an A&R plan we're going to file with you to create the lot. So that would be, so I expect you're going to see the A&R plan first at your board, and then we're going to be going through the Board of Health review. Board of Health, of course, is reviewing for compliance with Title V and the Northborough on-site wastewater disposal regulations, which add on additional protections in addition to the state regulation. And we did do some preliminary soil testing that wasn't witnessed by the Board of Health, but I'm a soil professional. I've been doing them for 20 plus years. And so we went out and we did some soil excavations following the same processes we would do with the Board of Health, but just to get a good idea and a good feel for the property. So we've already done that preliminary work, and we'll set that in stone, if you will, with official testing over the next expect couple of weeks with the Board of Health.
Okay, so any questions from staff?
No, they have addressed all of my concerns and questions to date.
Okay, Amy, did you have something? I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on this picture here. You mentioned, so all the light green is going to be clear cut, and then you're putting in trees, but you're building it up. How many feet did you say it was coming out?
It varies. The biggest fill is on the left side here. It's so you have about 4 to 5 feet in here, depending the terrain. It goes up and down. We're close to grade through most of the middle of the site here, and then there's a little bit of fill between the foundations. So keep in mind, we're going to have excavation for the foundations. We're going to have excavation for the stormwater basins. We're going to have excavation for the septic systems. You're going to have an excavation for the driveways, because there's a vertical component to that. It's not just the horizontal, you just pave on the ground. There's structural materials that come in. So what we're trying to do here is balance that so that we don't have to haul soil offsite. We want to keep that here. So we've kind of designed this in a way to minimize any export of soil. We want to keep all that on the property and just adjust where it falls.
Okay. Along those lines, I was just thinking, I know we've got a list of conditions, but one thing I didn't think about before was for the cleanup and for any excavation, there's going to be a lot of trucks going in and out. Is there any way we could do a condition where they go out Ridge onto Lyman Street to try to keep it off of Maple Street and where the schools are, towards the high school, towards Peasley School? I'm not sure how long construction's going to take, but I think it would be best if the trucks shoot out and get onto Lyman and then Route 9 or the main highways. I don't know if this is something for Lori or Fred, if this is something we could add. How long do you think construction will
Sure, I
take?
can add that condition.
Through the chair, I think that's a great observation. I'm just doing a quick Google map check just to make sure we don't have any unintended
Right.
bad consequences from putting trucks in one direction versus the other.
Sure.
Something I might, it's tough to do this on the fly. Something I might suggest, I definitely think that is a good thing to consider. I would suggest that that we're going to be doing a lot of upfront work, and there's a lot of things we have to submit and check and all this. I think part of that is just have the contractor submit basically a truck route to staff, and emphasize. I would emphasize that you don't want it going towards the schools and the residential areas if at all possible. So bring them out through, I don't know what the route would end up being. Depends
Right, I
if they're
think-
going north, south, east, west, you know.
I see Damon has his hand up. I don't know if you can see it,
Oh,
Carrie. but-
sure. Yep, I can.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I don't think that will be that big a deal, Scott, because they're either gonna be going towards 495 or towards 290 likely. And if they go
Likely.
towards 290, they can go out to Lyman. It would be a little bit longer just to get through downtown, but I don't think it'd be that big a deal if they're going that direction.
Because if they went up Maple, they'd hit downtown too. It's just trying to keep it off of the residential streets.
Well, if they take Lyman out to Route 20, then at
Mhm.
least they would miss Maple Street and Peasley.
I can write up something to that effect.
Okay, so we're adding something to that effect, and that's okay?
I think we can work with that.
I can add that to condition 3. Prior to construction activity, the applicant shall submit the following. And the truck route for planning board review and approval.
Okay, so did any other questions of what the presentation was seeing tonight from the board or staff?
So I have a couple questions.
Okay.
First of all, I think you guys have done an enormous amount of work on this, and I really am impressed with what you guys have come up with. Thank you for all the work. I have a couple questions on the easement for Lot 2. Is that something that does or doesn't show up in one of these plans, and how big is that? Is there one easement or is there two?
So there are 2 easements on lot 2.
Okay,
So the first, you'll see, I'll zoom in a little bit. So the first is related to the common driveway itself, and that actually extends onto lot 1 and lot 3 as well. And all 3 lots will have, basically equal rights to utilize that easement for access to the properties. That's the common driveway, maintenance, HOA, all that stuff. And then lot 2 will also enjoy what is effectively an access easement, but basically a shoreline easement along this frontage, because lot 3 ends up having to wrap around here to make our areas work. So what we're doing is we've made lot 3 a lot bigger to account for the I mentioned the groundwater overlay district line kind of splits a piece of this lot. So what we did is we oversized that. We put a lot more land on it.
okay,
So there's nothing that lot 2 could ever build in this. It's all protected 25-foot setback, 35-foot setback area anyways, but the easement just grants them the rights to go down and utilize that water frontage over lot 3.
okay. So it's that whole buffer area. I wasn't sure if there was a path or a designated road area or something like
Nope,
that. Okay.
nope, it's just to enjoy the waterfront. It's admittedly, I have one easement over a neighbor's property. It's almost exactly the same. And I use it to walk up to the pond and get access to it.
Okay, all right. And I guess the second question I have is on the common drive, the completion of the common drive. Is that something that is expected to be completed before the first house is occupied, or are there contingencies on getting that work done that are related to the selling or the occupancy of a house?
I can answer that, or Lori can. I also didn't answer the schedule question that came up earlier. So maybe I can start and Lori can fill in. So the construction sequence is going to go clean up first. So 25-foot zone, get that stabilized, site cleanup. That all happens right out of the gate. Nothing else can really go forward until that work is done. And then they're going to start building the common driveway. I expect all of this to take between 3 to 5 months for the site work, the bulk of the site work to be done and beginning to a stabilized condition. After that, you would have your house construction. And the question is, does the common driveway have to be done first? Yes, it does. However, you're not going to finish pave the common driveway while you have lot construction underway, because you're just going to destroy the pavement. So there's a condition in the both conservation, and I believe it's worded exactly the same, where the developer has to submit basically a tripartite or bond or some sort of surety that reserves money to finish the road. So whatever's left, it's usually finished paving. It's usually like setting bounds, doing an as-built plan. Those are usually what you're going to see. And then there's timeframes, prior to building permit, prior to occupancy, things like that. That I believe that the bond has to be put into place before building permit. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lori. But
It's prior to issuance of an occupancy permit.
occupancy. Okay.
And then, so that's condition number 6, draft condition number 6. And then I did have to, there's a typo in that condition where I had referenced condition number 18, but of course the decision has changed. So it should reference condition 19 having to do with the as-built plan. So, and then I have a condition in there, number 21, that specifies that all of the work needs to be completed within a 4-year time frame, unless the planning board grants an extension for good cause.
Okay, that was my next question, is to put a time frame on it, because you don't want something to go unfinished for years. That doesn't usually work out well. Okay, that was it for me.
Quick question for Scott. And if this is redundant, I apologize. But in that, I forget what we're calling it, that buffer or setback from the water, did you say that remains untouched before and after? Is all the original trees staying there? Or?
Yeah. So through the Conservation Commission in their bylaw, their Northborough bylaw, they have a 25-foot no disturb setback from any wetland resource area. However, in this case, that zone is already disturbed.
Okay.
So what we worked out, and a lot of this detail comes through that process of vetting that setback provision and what they protect there. We are not granted permission to go and create view quarters and clear cut all this stuff. We were given permission by the Conservation Commission to go in, clean up that buffer, restore it, and they have tree planting requirements, bush planting requirements, seeding requirements for anything that is disturbed. These little foundation areas, piles of trash, et cetera. And then once that's done, and again, we're doing it first so we can start getting all that stuff growing back in. But yeah, that's the idea. So
Okay.
It's a permit to clean that up and restore it back to a natural condition.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions here from the board?
Actually, did you say you have an arborist that's already been out there, or you will have one once you start?
We will have them once we start. Part of the criteria is that we're not going to rely on contractor or tree guy or whatever to decide how to protect the trees.
Okay.
They'd like an arborist come out and take a look at them. Because we just, best intentions are going to be to save every tree, but we just don't know what the condition they're going to be in,
Yeah.
what they're growing through. And so we're trying to be very mindful of that.
And I think even after the arborist comes in, then Vincent has to approve it beyond that anyway.
Correct.
So-
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you.
They're giving a recommendation, then Vincent would sign off on that or adjust it as he sees fit.
Sure.
Okay. So two things for me. One, it looks like one of the conditions is exactly what we need, which is the A&R. So this needs to be split into the 3 different lots. So that looks like that was one of the first conditions, A. Or 3A. Okay. My other question, wondering if it's missing, and I do see that the septic is in here as complying in accordance with the requirements of Northborough Department of Health. Maybe it's splitting hairs and saying the same thing, but in our subdivision rules and regs, you need approval before, do we need to actually specify that approval is required from Northborough Department of Health, or does that cover it, Laura? I guess that's a question for you, Lori.
I have as condition number 9, septic system shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the requirements of the Northborough Department of Health.
Okay,
Or
so
maybe I should say Board of Health.
Oh, yeah, I didn't catch that either. But just in terms of like, it's what we're looking for is, they need an actual approval from the Board of Health. And so is that already implied by way of that?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what my intent was, but if you'd prefer me to change the verbiage, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, just to make it clear, it's an approval, because so I'm just looking at our subdivision rules and regs. So for all, board members, you may not have a printed copy of the rules and regs. So they're online if you want to look them up, or I can pull them up too. But so I'm looking at common driveway, but then in general, we have general subdivision rules and regs that apply. And would the Northborough Board of Health approval be considered also required for the common driveway?
Yes, they're not going to be able to get a building permit for the homes unless they first have an approved septic system.
Okay, Fred,
From
you
the
had
Board of
something
Health.
there?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that technically it's not a subdivision. And so that requirement for the Board of Health to
Right.
sign off before you can approve is not required.
Okay.
What Lori has in the decision is appropriate for them to have that approval from the Board of Health prior to starting the construction. So technically it's not a subdivision, and that one doesn't apply.
For the common driveway, right. It just made me nervous. The septic system is the one thing that makes me a little nervous, just because it's such a sensitive area, but it sounds like that's in place even as a condition.
Yeah.
And
I'm
obviously-
sure that they did their due diligence and know exactly what kind of soil they're dealing with. And so they would not have gone this far if they didn't think they could build those septic systems the way they needed to be.
Perfect, that makes sense. Okay, so did everybody have a chance to look at the proposed conditions at this point? Are there any additional comments or questions about what we have? Amy, you have something?
Yeah, I just had one with number 5. It was more of grammatical. And it says applicant shall submit to the planning board homeowners association. So
Yes, I noticed that as well. So I proposed to fix that wordsmith it a little bit. So it says, prior to the sale of any individual lots and/or issuance of an occupancy permit for a dwelling, the applicant shall submit, comma, for planning board review, comma, the homeowners association documents and a declaration of covenants, easements, and restrictions, etc. It was a little awkwardly worded, so I'm happy to clarify that.
thank you. I think that was the only thing I had.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, clarifications? Okay, this is a public hearing. I will take comments from the public. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment at this time? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Jim, I assume you don't either. So no. Oops, go ahead. Was that you, Jim?
Yep, I don't see any.
Okay. Okay, so it looks like there are no public comments at this time. There are no further questions from the board, no further questions from staff, no further comments from the applicant. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I just have one more thing, sorry, before it closes. A lot of times, Fred, there's, and maybe I just missed it. A lot of times there's something where the DPW says there's a cost to connect to the water. Is that
I
in here?
did, yeah, I did put under condition 4, prior to issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall complete the following. Letter B is submit water betterments to the Department of Public Works.
Okay, we just don't know what the cost is yet. That would be
That's
figured
from
out
them.
between the two of them.
Yes.
It's a
Okay.
standard single house fee of $4,200 per lot.
Okay,
But it's comes up when they go to file the road opening permit for that common driveway, they'll be told about the water permit. But I believe they already been made aware of it, but it's not not necessarily required to be in the decision.
okay, thanks.
Okay, then, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, Millie,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
And carries an aye. So at this point, the public hearing has been closed. Before we get into a discussion and final vote, we do have a couple of waivers that we need to vote on prior to the approval of the common driveway special permit and site plan approval. So the two waivers that we have a partial waiver from section 1036-130A1 of the rules and regs. Do you want me to pull that up? If I know we don't have printed copies, I don't believe I don't know. Does everybody have a printed copy of the rules and regs, or are you able to access them? Do you want me to pull them up?
Yeah, I mean, I saw them, but
Okay, so hold on, I'm gonna share my screen so everybody can see. Okay, do you see common driveways here? Did I pull up the wrong thing?
No, you got it.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. So let's see, we are looking at the 130, whoops, 136, 130A1. So this is in our common driveway section. And what the waiver is for is, let's see, the proposed common driveway is going to have a paved surface of 20 feet with 2-foot compacted gravel shoulders, whereas the rules and regs have the width of 18 feet with an easement width of 24 feet. Wait, is that making sense? Am I looking at the right one?
There's a reference that goes to I think Fred, correct me if I'm wrong. It's the regulations that's in the municipal code under the Board of Selectmen. I had to ask Fred because I was kind of confused.
The term is the minimum town road standards. This is a direct reference from the town code of the minimum town road standards that goes back many years.
So it's like from the 1960s. And when you pull up the municipal code, it says that if you have 3 or more homes, then the paved surface shall be 22 feet wide. So that's where I got that from.
Okay, then is that really, is that the right section then? 1036, 130A1?
So this,
the right waiver.
this is the section that references the town of Northborough's minimum road standards, which is actually a municipal code requirement. So it's kind of confusing. It's very confusing. That's actually one of the things that I have on my wish list to clarify. Because when you look at those standards from the 1960s,
Hmm.
they are so old fashioned that, in my opinion, they really aren't appropriate for this day and age. They're like 50 years old. So I'd like to fix that.
Okay, so in the meantime, this board, so that everybody understands, we need to vote on a waiver for this particular piece. So is there any comments or thoughts or clarification required on this part of it? Or have Laurie and Fred already addressed what this part is?
I'm good with it.
Probably what I should do is remove the one. Now that I'm looking at it, it's probably best just to refer to the A and get rid of the subsection 1.
Okay,
So I'm gonna fix that in the decision.
okay, and we'll need to fix that in the motion then. Okay, so in that case, if there, and we can discuss after we make a motion second, but I'm going to entertain a motion to grant a partial waiver from section 1036-130A of Northborough Rules and Regulations governing the subdivision of land, requirement that common driveway serving 3 or more homes have a paved surface of 22 feet wide. The proposed common driveway shall have a paved surface of 20 feet with 2-foot compacted gravel shoulders.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so this motion has now been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this waiver? Okay. Roll call vote then. Amy,
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Did I miss anyone in that? Sorry, I can't see everyone at the same time.
No.
Got it.
Okay. The second waiver we need to discuss is section 7.2C9 of Planning Board Rules and Regs, requirement to locate trees over 10 inches in diameter at breast height. This is something we talked about as part of the application. Does anybody have any questions or need further clarification on this one? Okay, I don't see anyone. Okay, then, is there a motion to grant a waiver from section 7.2C9 of the Northborough Planning Board Rules and Regulations, requirements to locate trees over 10 inches in diameter at breast height?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, the motion for this waiver has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. We have Millie,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can see everybody. So we at this point have the 2 waivers granted. The next part is discussion for the special permit and site plan approval piece of it. So why don't we go through first the special permit for the common driveway? Does everybody have a copy? I just stopped sharing my screen, but if you're, do you want me to pull it back up for the requirements for the common driveway? Would that be helpful?
Might as well.
Okay, are we back to common driveways?
Yep.
Okay. So basically, if you were to look in our zoning bylaws, it will send for the special permit for common driveways, it'll send us back over to here. So just in terms of our own deliberation to support our decision, if we take time here to just take a quick look, noting that we did grant 2 waivers. So I think most of these were covered in either conditions, Fred's review. Is there anything, if board members are to look through the requirements here, that you feel has not been adequately met and would prevent this special permit from being granted? So first we have A. Any comments on A, 1 through 7?
No, I think all those criteria were met.
Okay. B, I think we received proper information from the fire chief. I think it was reviewed by DPW and Fred and Lori as well. Any concerns with meeting B?
I think so.
Did the driveway exceed this length? Or need any additional requirements? I don't think so. Okay. Okay. Any concerns or comments supporting or against C, D, or E? I think Fred adequately reviewed D for us.
C's in the decision.
Mhm.
E's in the decision.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're covered.
Okay. And lastly, I think we know this to be true. Common driveways exit onto the frontage street. And that was made evident in the plans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen unless anybody wants to cover any item more in depth. I think the board so far has expressed that it does meet these requirements of the common driveway as outlined in our rules and regulations. I'm going to stop sharing that. For the site plan portion, I'm going to shift gears for a second here. Okay, so if everybody has their site plan and their bylaws, we want to open that up. Okay, so if everybody's looking at, I think it's 716 in our new book, if everybody has a copy of that, our decision criteria for the site plan. Lori, does that match what you have in the decision? It would be 703050, D, no,
I have
Mhm.
section 7-03-050 C, subsection 2, subsection B.
okay.
The criteria 1 through 9.
Yep. Okay. You don't have it starting from A, meets all applicable requirements of the bylaw, does that matter?
You know, I just kind of simplified it by saying the proposed development satisfies criteria 1 through 9 as specified in zoning bylaws section and the section I just read.
Okay, I think that's okay. Okay, so planning board members, given the location type and extent of the land use proposed by the proponent, the design of building form, building location, egress points, grading, and other elements of the site plan could not be reasonably altered to. If in looking at 1 through 9 here, does anybody feel that that is the case? So reduce clearing and grading on the site and so on. Any concerns there?
Nope.
Reduce risk of groundwater contamination from on-site wastewater disposal systems, et cetera.
That should be up to the Board of Health, right?
Mhm.
Hopefully if they follow their regulations, yeah.
Okay. Improve pedestrian, bicycle, or vehicular safety. Any issues?
No.
Improve access to each structure for fire and other emergency service equipment. Any issues?
No, the fire chief said it was fine, right?
Yep. Reduce visual intrusion by controlling the visibility of parking, storage, or other outdoor service areas. I don't think it's really super applicable here. Any issues?
No,
Okay. Achieve greater consistency and compatibility with surrounding area.
fine.
And I guess I would add too, I think they did a really great job keeping things the best that they could, not getting rid of trees, trying to keep that setback in place. And I actually think did a really nice job with that particular item. Reduce glare from headlights, etc. Not really applicable. Well, it's a kind of self-contained with all the trees in general, I think.
Yeah.
Avoid the removal or disruption of historic, traditional, or significant structures. I think in this case, the
I think we
removal.
want that.
I think, yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I guess I'd add here too, really appreciative of the work going into cleaning up that area. I know it's a lot, and I think it's a significant benefit to the town to clean that up. So I think that's the significant improvement for us. Reduce obstruction of scenic views. I don't- with all the-
Open up the scenic views rather than obstruct.
I agree.
Yeah, I do too. There were no variances required for this particular, there were no variants required here. We didn't have that. Okay.
No variances.
Okay, is there any further discussion on whether or not this application meets the site plan criteria? Okay, then in that case, I will entertain a motion to grant the common driveway special permit and site plan approval for the property located at 75 Ridge Road in accordance with findings of fact 1 through 10 and subject to conditions 1 through 24.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Any additional comments? Motion's been made and seconded. Further discussion? Nope. Okay, all in favor, Millie,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and carries an aye. Okay, great.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
guys.
much, everyone. This has been a great process.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
year.
For all the hard work.
North
luck.
thanks you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Okay. Moving along, next on the agenda, we have the public hearing for 30 Forbes Road, Building B, modification to a special permit for use in the groundwater protection overlay district area 3. And I have a public hearing notice to read if we want to bring in the representatives for that application. I'm going to read the public hearing notice into record. In accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 48, Section 9, the Northborough Planning Board will hold a public hearing on September 20th, 2022 at 6:20 p.m. to consider the application for a modification to a special permit in the Industrial District and special permit per Groundwater Protection Overlay District Area 3 for 30 Forbes Road, Building B, Map 15, Parcel 15 through 18, submitted by Aspen Aerogels for expansion of research and development use. Application and plans prepared by High Point Engineering, Inc. are on file at the Town Clerk's Office, the Planning Director's Office, and the Planning Department's webpage. Pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on July 16, 2022, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. To participate in the public comment portions of this meeting from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device, please click on the URL posted in the public agenda to join. Submitted by Carrie Martinek, Chairman, September 4th and September 11th, 2022. Okay, let's see. On the applicant team, who do we have here? Do we know who we need to bring in?
We have a giant team of folks that I anticipate joining the public meeting. There was a list of about 7 folks. You need their specific names, I can get that for you.
Or if they raise their hands in the attendee side, I can just put, no, there we go. I have Josh Vitullo, there we go. And then once they come in, they can start to identify each other. Okay. So for the team coming in, do you see everybody that should be here? Are you missing anybody, or is somebody in here that should not be in here?
I think we are missing Rachel Oiskind.
Oh, actually, you come in as Rachel. So let's see, there's like two other options for Rachel. So let's see what we get here.
There's the real Rachel.
Yes, is there a real Rachel? Oops, there's the real, so there's two Rachels here. Is there the one with the hand, I assume is the right one, or?
That is, am I not on?
You're on 3 times.
Okay.
Once
Oh,
it's the hand.
I forwarded, okay, I get it. I forwarded the request to all of them.
Okay.
So can you see me or no?
Nope, but you have your hand raised on one instance and nothing on the other instance. I just want to make sure it's somehow related to you.
So the team should be myself, Josh Vitullo, George Gould, who is the first Rachel Weiskin. Rachel Weiskin, who just showed up visibly, who is our Director of Environmental Safety, Alex Bowden, who is our on-site EHS professional, who is probably the other Rachel who we can't see. George has now changed his to George Gould. George is our Chief Technology Officer. We also have Bob Allen, who's our outside counsel. I don't think he has come over, as well as Ashley Clark, who works with.
I see Bob. Oh, Ashley's not in yet, so I'm going to bring Ashley. And there's Bob. Is that it for your team?
That's it.
All right, great. Well, welcome. We have a full house, it looks like. So tonight we're looking at the modification to a special permit. Is there a presentation that you would like to make?
Sure. So I'm gonna, if it's okay, start with a short presentation. I'll try to go relatively quick through it. I've already introduced the team. Feel free to stop at any point and ask any questions along the way, and then I'll open it up at the end for further questions, if that makes sense. So I'll start sharing the screen.
Okay.
Excellent. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So thank you for having us. First, we wanted to just introduce who we were. I already introduced the team. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Josh Vitullo. I am the Assistant General Counsel here at Aspen Aerogels. Aspen is a 20-year-old technology company. We produce aerogel technology. We have been in Northborough for almost the entire history of our company at the 30 Forbes Road location. It is currently home to our aerogel and advanced battery R&D along with office space. It originally also housed our manufacturing and our operations facilities. Those were moved out in roughly 2008 and then finally decommissioned in 2010. And since that time, we have not been conducting manufacturing operations at that facility. What we do as a company is produce aerogel technology that is used mainly in as a safety component for electric vehicle battery systems, along with low-cost battery materials for energification, along with energy infrastructure solutions and sustainability building materials. Again, though, the 30 Forbes facility is only an R&D facility with office space attached to it, so it does not produce any of those materials. What we are here for is to ask for a modification to our 2002 special groundwater permit. As it may make sense, our 2002 special groundwater permit was made with the idea that that facility would be home to our manufacturing facility, as well as our R&D, as well as our headquarters, our offices and back office. That's no longer the case and has not been the case for a little while. So we wanted to update that in order to adjust it with the current reality, along with our future expansion into the site for full use of R&D. We also want to make sure that we recognize as part of that the transfer from a manufacturing facility to an R&D facility actually results in about a 90% chemical storage reduction from our original use, along with an updated manual with new 2022 practices. And of course, we've provided the new use of chemicals as part of our application process. Right here, we're really kind of looking at what we're looking for and what the status is. So we started off with about 36,000 total gallons of flammable liquid. We're going to be going through this process and then through the licensing process to seek to amend that to a much smaller number, about 2,000 total gallons of flammable liquid. And where this started is we applied to the Board of Selectmen. In May of 22, we had this earlier BOS hearing in June. We went through with a new application and then a groundwater advisory committee meeting September 15th. Thankfully, that was a very productive meeting, and I think there was the unanimous recommendation to move forward, which brought us here today. I'm putting this on the screen next. This is our floor plan to kind of show what this facility is going to look like from the inside. I can zoom in if you'd like. This really is just to give people an idea of how the facility is going to look. It'll have office space along the bottom corridor, and I'm kind of going to roll my mouse over top of that down here. You'll have an entrance space where I'm circling in the bottom left. You'll have continued office space and large office space here with some lab space, a lot of new lab space going into this back right corner, and additional lab space going out to the left side as well, along with storage and other provisions. All of this has been reviewed by OHI Engineering, who also came by and took a look at our current loading dock and storage facility, and they provided a recommendation that's also part of our application that we submitted prior to the groundwater meeting. So we're happy to talk to that too in more detail if anyone has any questions. We also included as part of our application our planning and our policy related to any potential spillage. As I mentioned, we have a large reduction in overall chemical use from our original use. Nonetheless, we actually have a significantly heightened amount of policies and procedures and training mechanisms. And you can see this most recent one was revised just a few weeks ago in August, and it continues to be revised and reviewed on a regular basis. And that's true for all our facilities. We have our manufacturing facility in Rhode Island. We are currently building another manufacturing facility in Georgia. We have office space in Marlborough, along with another research facility that's also going to be in Marlborough as well. And then I wanted to make this be a bit of a broad and a high-level overview, but I know that there were a number of questions from the last hearing at the BOS. Many of whom those members are also here. I think a lot of those are probably answered in our submission, but I wanted to just check through a few of them anyway, because I think that they're really helpful and they're useful questions. So I'm going to go through and do that and just take a minute or two to go through that. And then I'm going to, if it makes sense, open the floor for any further questions. We have George Gould, who's our Chief Technology Officer and who works at the facility and is happy to answer any questions, along with Rachel Weiskind, Alex, and the rest of our team. So the first question was, were they decommissioned and only operating as a headquarters when they reduced the quantities? And if so, is that now an expansion of use? Since the decommissioning, the facility has been used as a R&D facility and as a headquarters or as a back office or a other office space and has various times been either the headquarters or other office space attached to it. And that's been the use since the 2008-2010 change from manufacturing forward. Is this an expansion of use, and do we need to go through a special permit or amendment? That's what actually was a great question, what brought us here today. So I think the answer we've all agreed is yes, and that's what we're asking for exactly today. What are the chemicals that were being used, and are they already approved by the 2002 special permit? I think we put a good chart in our application that goes through each of the various sets of chemicals and compares them to what we previously had been utilizing in the 2002 special permit. We're happy to go through more detail. The reduction, though, is approximately 92-ish% from the 2002 permit to today. Next question is 20 years later, do these chemicals need further review? And the answer is that we brought forth that list of chemicals to the Groundwater Advisory Committee. We've also had them reviewed by the fire department, and each entity has reviewed them and came to the same determination as we have, that we don't present a hazard to groundwater in the area, which is the same conclusion that OHI came to as well. And then the next question, did Groundwater Committee review? And the answer is yes on 915. Has the storage been reviewed and approved as acceptable? And to that, the answer again is yes. It was approved when it was first installed by the fire department and by others in 2016, and we've had reviews since then as well. It was also reviewed as part of this process by OHI, and that review was reviewed by the Groundwater Committee. The next is, what is the contingency plan for leaks? We've produced our contingency plan kind of in full, and that's been updated obviously since the 2002 version and reviewed both with the Groundwater Advisory Committee along with the fire department and others. The floor has a spill containment along with epoxy floors with a 3-inch containment beam. The containment allows for containment of about 840 gallons of liquid. We follow industry best practices with respect to our spill response and a detailed spill plan in place. And just for clarification, we use the same standard at this facility as we do at our manufacturing facility in Rhode Island, even though the requirements may be different based on a lot less hazardous waste materials being stored at the research facility versus the manufacturing facility, but we use industry best practices in both areas, of course. There was another question related to whether or not there's a site plan, and we've included that as part of our application. And then another question related to abutters, and of course we've notified abutters as part of this process. I think that answers the questions that were asked at that BOS meeting. I know I really went through them fast, but we're happy to elaborate. And then if there are any other questions, we're happy to answer them as well. So with
Great.
that, I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. That was really thorough. I appreciate you taking the time to answer those questions. That was super helpful, and to submit the materials that you did as well was really helpful. Any additional board questions or clarifications? Millie?
Yeah, I have some questions. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just on, do you expect any traffic changes, increase in personnel, office, anything that you can enlighten us with on that?
We have expanded our personnel, so we're anticipating about 60 people, personnel scientists, engineers, and a few administrators in the facility, our EH&S representative. But that's about the same number of people as we've had there for the past 10 years or so.
Okay. No changes in any, or maybe even less than you've had originally with the loading dock, warehousing, things like that?
certainly less than original. We've had the loading dock since 2016. We anticipate actually using it a little bit less if we have an expansion of our solvent storage license, and that we won't have to remove our chemical waste quite as frequently to maintain ourselves under the limit.
Okay. That's about all that I had for now.
Other board questions at this time? I'm sorry. Yep.
That's okay. So I do have a question. I know you mentioned contacting the abutters, and I'm assuming you've received answers back or not. But I know one of your abutters is a agricultural area that has animals, and Fred, this might be more for you than anyone else, but has there been any concern about the chemical runoff for animals in the area?
Not specifically for the animals, but the Groundwater Advisory Committee did review the processes in place and felt that the spills, in the event that one were to happen inside the building, are completely contained adequately. The safeguards and deliveries, which is significantly reduced with the 90% reduction in the volume of chemicals, is also same as it has been from the original permit. So it's
the original permit though was made prior to SA Farm, the SA Farm permit. So that's where my concern came in. Right. So this is a change in permit with the new farm next door.
Well, I don't believe the farm is a direct abutter. It didn't really play into the decision-making process. What we do is we look at the process that they're proposing and then offer the safeguards for the environment, and felt it was appropriate. Not sure how else I can answer that.
Okay.
Fred, did you want to go over, I know you had just had a meeting recently and you sent the board a letter of your specific recommendations. Is there anything you wanted to cover or
actually the letter did go to the applicant, so they all have it as you have it. I can go through it line by line if you like, or we can just, I don't believe there's any questions. Everything was discussed extremely thoroughly at the Groundwater Committee meeting last week. And it was agreed upon. So like I said, I can go through the items, each one, if there's something, if you want me to read everything, or if you want to look at some in particular. But I believe that the applicant has been made aware of it. They have the letter, and I have not been made aware of any issues on their end.
That's right. We have the letter and we don't have any questions on our end.
Okay, and then I realize not all of these are conditions, they're statements. Lori, are there any conditions that need to be added from Fred's letter? The floor drains or anything?
So a couple of the things that he had identified in his letter, I thought were more suitable as findings of fact, because they were referencing various exhibits that had been submitted with the application and found to be adequate and in compliance with the zoning bylaws. So I put those, a couple I specifically wanted to call out in the findings of fact. One is number 8. It's the letter from OHI Engineering Incorporated stating that certifying that the use will not degrade the quality and or supply of the underlying groundwater resources to the point whereby a hazard to public health or ecological damage results. And the second issue had to do with condition 2 in the original permit. So it was more of a statement than a condition. So that had to do with finding of facts number 9. The applicant submitted an updated hazardous waste contingency plan to replace the contingency plan manual referenced in the original decision. So in the conditions, I didn't actually have any new conditions, but I did want to modify conditions number 3 and conditions number 10 in the original special permit decision. So condition number 3, of course, I'm sure you have in front of you, so I won't read the entire thing. The long and short of it is the applicant would be authorized to store up to 3,000 gallons of flammable and combustible liquids and 500 cubic feet of flammable gases on site. And then there's more language in that condition having to do with the storage and also complying with the fire department to ensure appropriate fire protection measures are achieved. So that's condition number 3. That's new language that would replace the old language. And the same with condition number 10. That condition had originally limited the footprint of research and development space. So I wanted to eliminate that and replace it with the applicant is authorized to utilize the entire building as mixed office research and development space. And then I put in a statement saying, except as modified herein, the terms of the Zoning Board of Appeals decision case number 0119 dated January 25th, 2002 shall continue in full force and effect.
Okay, my only question, I guess, on the letter from Fred would be if number 5 needs to be represented as a condition about the floor drains within the restroom locker room area.
So what I did is there's some language that he had in that statement, which I excerpt from there and put in number 3. And it says the applicant shall take all necessary and appropriate actions to prevent spills from leaving the lab area.
Okay.
So that had to do with the floor drain language.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Any comments or questions? Amy, you had one?
Yeah, that's actually where my question was too. I was gonna ask the applicant, does anyone use the locker room? Like, and I was gonna ask you when you went through the map where it was in the building.
The locker room is towards the right-hand side of the floor layout. I don't know if you have an exhibit around, or Josh, you can put it back up. There's a men's locker room and a women's locker room on the right-hand side, and it's not heavily used, but it is used.
Okay, I just didn't know if the floor drains could be closed if it, you know, where our decision says that any part can be used for office / R&D.
That was one thing that Fred and I had discussed, but we were concerned that closing the floor drains would be a violation of the plumbing code. So we didn't want to cause any problems on that end.
I wonder if that section of the building then shouldn't be included as R&D. You know, just in the future, if we give approval that the whole building can be R&D at some point, maybe the locker rooms won't be used and they'll say, oh, you know, why don't we use that area for something? My only concern. And
we will have to maintain bathrooms, of course, for the people who work there. So I don't think we can squeeze the entire space for R&D work as much as it sounds fun.
okay, well, there's a bathroom on the left side of the building too, isn't there?
There is, and that's the one where it actually has a tile floor, which is above the epoxy coated floor in the hallway. So we're going to be looking at all the reasonable measures to put on weather stripping on the bottom of the doors nearby to the laboratories, and potentially using a temporary drain cover, which can be removed by maintenance staff if they need to use the drain.
So is the whole front of the building that he said was office, is that's potential R&D too on the map?
So right now it's being used as office space. We suspect that it could end up being used as office space. We don't think it makes a ton of sense to say that the way that it's set up today is the way that it'll be set up. in the future. And if we wanted to move the office space to a different portion, have a relatively similar. We're always going to have some office space there because people are going to have to obviously go back to their offices. There's going to be an administrative staff that oversees the laboratory work. And as much as George would like to spend all day in the lab, we're going to put him into an office some days as well. So we're going to have some office space, but whether or not it's there on the site plan or somewhere else, right now it makes sense for it to be there. I think it's been there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to say that that would be something that we're going to contemplate being that way for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add, and George can certainly comment on this as well. The R&D group doesn't use chemicals constantly and all the time. A lot of their work requires them to do data analysis, write reports, and do everything else. So those offices are pretty important for them to have, in terms of once they are done with their chemistry, they do need to go somewhere to do the office work that's required for the studies that they're compiling.
Sure.
So would you say it'd be fair to leave those as office spaces as part of our decision? And have the R&D be, it looks like to me like there's 3 rows of space broken down. And the first row was office, and the middle 2 are current R&D lab space.
I just hesitate only because I don't want to run into the same issue that really brought us here today, that the current use, while not changing in any significant way, or even changing in a way that becomes safer, is a reason that we should be coming back. That said, if that's the worst, we're going to have office space. I can't imagine a world where we don't. The technology changes, life changes. The floor print of the company is expected to have some minor modifications over time without having significant change overall. So we will have office space. I would be hesitant to have it excluded as a condition.
I think I can just describe a general principle here. We're using the top of that diagram. The floor plan is all of our laboratory space, where chemical handling and storage is all on the north side of that. As you go south, you're transitioning into laboratories which are analytical measurement. No what chemicals are being used. Then there is a buffering hallway, a central corridor for travel that's going to remain. Then you're getting into the office space, and the actual square footage of the office space. I think with what we don't want to get into is, hey, you've gone from 30,000 square feet of R&D space to 32,000. Now you need to go back for a special groundwater permit. Now that is up to you, of course, but if we are going to refurbish any of this space, we would need to have a building permit, because we would be building a new lab or whatever. And again, I think the various processes that the town has in place, which is very thorough, you have a chance to say no, or you need to do something specific about floor drains and whatnot to make sure that it is as safe to the community as possible.
My only concern, because I was on groundwater, is this seems to have a lot more chemicals than a lot of the companies that came in front of me when I was on groundwater. We were very specific about no floor drains. So to open up that area with the floor drains to R&D, even though we laugh and say we always need a bathroom, you just never know. Someone could stick something in the locker room for storage and say, well, we got the approval that this whole building is R&D. So I don't know. I just saw it happen when the schools got too crowded. They used everything. They used the library. They used different rooms for uses that you didn't think were going to be used for. And people snickered, but they got used when it got really crowded. That's just my only concern, is there are floor drains in there. And I just would like to, even if it's the bottom right section, block it off from R&D to make sure there's nothing in the areas of the floor drains.
Would it make some sense to make as a condition then that any area of the property that has any floor drains could not be used as R&D, which I think would be more than reasonable and something that we have no contemplation of anyway.
Sure, R&D or chemical storage.
I think that's fine.
Yep.
Carrie?
Yes.
I just wanted to interject a little bit. The condition says that the lab area, the applicant will take every appropriate and necessary action to make sure that the lab area, a spill in the lab area doesn't leave the lab area. And that would hold true if the lab area were to be expanded into the office area now. So the condition would still be appropriate. The floor drain would still be protected from any spill as long as they adhere to that condition. They also would need a building permit from the building inspector in order to modify the arrangement inside the building beyond what's on the plan now. And he would be checking the special permit to make sure that those floor drains are protected, or the lab area is isolated from the floor drain. So I'm not sure it's necessary. I think the groundwater committee wanted to focus on the fact that the manufacturing operation, which was really more of a significant hazard to the groundwater than the R&D lab, is gone away. And that was a huge benefit, along with the 90% reduction in the volume of chemicals that are being stored on site. So I think the big picture is the town's pretty well protected.
When there was a fire in 2004, was it, do you know if it was the R&D section or the manufacturing?
It was in the manufacturing space.
Just because, I mean, I'm not sure what they did differently in the manufacturing space versus the R&D space, because the R&D space still works with chemicals, as far as I can tell.
We the major difference would be is, you know, we handle chemicals in much smaller containers than the manufacturing operation, which is both larger in volume and also rather large tanks. So, you know, thousands of gallons of liquid in those tanks. Also lots more drums and other types of large containers. There was a fire. I was there at that time. It was a bad fire. We certainly did not want that repeated. You know, and startup companies often learn the hard way, you know, how to improve practices and engineering designs and things of that nature. We are so much better now in our current operations in Rhode Island, and we'll be even a generation better as we go down to Georgia in terms of our manufacturing practices. The R&D operations in Northborough we've not had a fire. We have not had a major chemical spill. We have not had an OSHA recordable injury in over 10 years. But not to say that we're great, you know, and I don't want to jinx anything. I'm just saying that our practices are very tight. We're very respectful of the location of each other. You know, safety is not just a word to talk about. It's what we believe in. Environmental compliance is key. We're very much dedicated to being good neighbors in this town. And we would like to keep our employees healthy and safe and going home at the end of the day.
Anthony, comments from you as our groundwater rep? Anything coming back from just your observations or the recommendation letter?
I don't think anything in particular. I think the team at Aspen did a really good job in thoroughly going through all the questions. I think they took their time and were articulate and actually quite pleasant working through the process. I can't think of anything else that's been covered tonight.
Okay, any thoughts on, well, from the board in general, I guess. So Amy's brought forward a possible condition. Fred isn't sure it's a necessary condition. Amy, do you feel like we've covered it in the current condition, or do you feel strongly otherwise, or what are your thoughts there?
You're on mute.
Sorry, I guess I'd just like to hear what the rest of the board thinks. I know it says the applicant shall take all necessary and appropriate actions to prevent spills. But I mean, that's not anything like that you can put a number on or forget what the word is, but
Okay. Thoughts
I don't
on,
know, I just, the drains, it would be my only holdback.
okay, other thoughts on that from the board?
Are the floors are covered with an epoxy? Is that what I understand for the entire building?
As I know, all the areas that chemical use, currently, they're all covered. I think the office areas, I doubt they're epoxy covered underneath the carpeting.
But
But I
would
don't
they
know.
be-
We could check it out. I don't know.
I was just curious if they were, I mean, you wanted the whole building to be R&D. Wouldn't you have to do that if you were going to use that?
Yeah,
I think that's the point. We'd have to go and get a building permit. We would
Sure.
have to go through the inspection process. It would trigger a look at the special permit and then trigger attention to people like Fred to say, hey, wait a second, what's going on here? That's why, not to put words in Fred's mouth, that's why I think he thought that the town was protected.
Sure. Mhm. Thank you.
I guess with me, the original number 10 said the research and development shall be limited to 3,000 square feet. Now we're opening it up to the whole building. It's offices now. I mean, can't we say it's opened up, and if it expands into the offices, then it comes back in front of the board?
Would a compromise position be that if it expands into the current locker rooms? Versus, the hesitancy is the locker spaces. If we take out 13 square feet of the office to expand to put some cabinetry in that's part, those are the little things that I would anticipate. But where I think Josh was going, if you want to put a limitation as to the current locker room area, if that gets changed to R&D, I think we could accept that as a condition if that satisfies you, Amy,
Yeah.
as a compromise.
I was also thinking, can you add a condition that if it expands to the office space, someone needs to go in and make sure there's epoxy on the floors. We don't know right now. The rest of the R&D area has epoxy on it, we're told, and then it might expand into the office space. Who's to say the building inspector in 10 years will know that there needs to be epoxy there? I mean, if it's in the condition, then it's pretty obvious for anybody 10, 20 years down the line.
Is that your practice in general, that lab space has epoxy on the floor? So if you were to expand in a certain area, that would be the practice, the normal practice?
That is the best practices for use of what chemicals. Some sort of chemical resistant coating, whether it's epoxy or something else, but it has to be impermeable to a spill so that it doesn't get into the concrete and then below that into the soil.
I think that the last point that George just made is important. It has to fit the purpose, not so much epoxy per se.
So there are two conditions in the existing, so the 2002 decision that speak to this. Condition number 4 says there shall be no floor drains within the material storage or manufacturing areas. Any existing floor drain shall be permanently closed. So we could modify condition number 4 to specify there shall be no floor drains within the material storage or research and development areas. So just changing that. And then condition number 5 says the floor shall be covered with a chemically resistant epoxy in all areas where solvents or chemicals are used within the building. So I think that would address Amy's most recent concern. So that is in the current decision. So there is a language saying that all conditions from the original decision shall stand. So I can just modify that number 4 in the way I specified if that helps.
And we're fine with that.
That makes sense.
Okay. So those two modifications, it was number 4 and number 5 have modifications?
We don't have to modify number 5. I think it would be perfect just the way it is. So just number 4 to replace manufacturing areas with research and development areas.
Okay. And the applicant is okay, that makes sense to the applicant? I want to make sure that.
It does, thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions or comments from the board or staff? Okay, this is a public hearing. I'm going to open it up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment? Okay, I don't see anyone with public comment at this time. Is there any additional information or questions from the board? I see we also have a letter on file from the fire chief of his review. We have fire chief comments. We, oops, clicked on something there. Sorry, gang, I clicked on a link and went down. Here we go. Okay, so we have Fred's letter, we have fire chief comments. No additional comments here. I know Lori, you prepared a look at some possible conditions, and I think the applicant has a copy of that.
Correct.
Okay, any comments from the applicant on the conditions that have been drafted?
We are fine.
Okay. All right, well, if there is no further information to present or questions or comments from the board, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I just have a question. If I have a change on one of the findings of facts, would you want me to say it now or wait till after we close the hearing?
You may as well if you know it and it would make sense to share.
Okay, and I don't know if it's because I typed on mine, my numbering for findings of fact go 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, but maybe that was.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Okay, I didn't, sometimes my.
Sorry about that.
The numbers too, but no, I only noticed because I have a change to number 7, which will now be number 5.
You are my official proofreader.
I just noticed it now. But number 5, which is 7, it says in a memo dated September 19th, 2022, the chairperson of the planning board from Fred Litchfield, town engineer, the groundwater advisory committee provided, and I would just stop it at recommendations. Or, you know, for approval, because they didn't recommend for approval, they just gave us recommendations to add to our decision.
To be included in any approval. So if we were to approve.
I would just, yeah, provided recommendations.
You want me to specify to be included within any approval?
Yeah, something like that, I think that makes it, or Amy, is that what you're getting at? To make it more of a contingency versus a statement of fact?
Yeah, more than a statement of approval, to be a recommendation if approved. But I guess if we have the finding of facts, it's gonna, you know, we're voting on it. I thought it could even be just stopped at recommendations. The groundwater advisory committee provided recommendations.
That sounds good to me.
And the revised floor plans mentioned in Fred's letter, are those listed as part of the decision as under the exhibits?
I did, yes.
Okay. Same thing with the hazardous waste contingency plan. They're all listed there.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I make a motion to close the public hearing for 30
Okay.
Forbes Road.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, Amy,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
And carries an aye. The public hearing has closed. And excuse me for one quick second. Sorry about that. I'm sure nobody's interested in what to wear to a semi-formal. Okay, So at this point, we are entertaining, or we will deliberate about a motion to grant modification of the special permit. Before we get to the actual motion, are there any comments or further deliberation of the board based on what we've heard tonight for testimony or presentation this evening? I would say that from my perspective, I know I had asked a lot of those questions, and I'm really happy to see the time that was taken to thoroughly answer them and look at them and really consider them and then go through the process. I know that that's probably took a lot of extra work and may have been obviously an expense and time and resources and all that. So I certainly appreciate that. I think it makes it much stronger to have this on file for them in the future so that they don't have to worry about not having the right permits in place. They're obviously a good partner and neighbor in Northborough. So I think it's good to make sure they have the right things they need to continue to do business and grow. So I'm happy for that as well. I don't know if any other comments from the board and Anthony, I know you mentioned there was a good experience in groundwater too. So that's great when we see that type of partnership.
Absolutely.
Okay. At this point, then I will entertain a motion to grant the modifications of special permit for a change of use and special permit per groundwater protection overlay district bylaw for the property located at 30 Forbes Road in accordance with findings of fact 1 through, is it 9 now?
The numbers changed.
Yep. Findings of fact 1 through
9.
9.
Yeah.
And subject to revised conditions 3, 4, and 10.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. I just want to double check that I'm not missing a page. Everybody also sees 1 through 9 now? And we also see the conditions that have been modified are 3, we did 4, 5 was not applicable, and we had 10. So that looks correct. I just want to make sure we have the right motion on the table. Okay, so that motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, great. Hearing no further discussion, I'll take a roll call vote. All in favor, Amy?
Aye.
Millie?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
And carries an aye. Okay, great.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Okay, moving along in our agenda, we are done with the public hearing portion of our evening, and we are on to old and new business. So next on the agenda is Brett Pelletier of Kirk and Company for a discussion of priorities for White Cliffs Mansion disposition. So Brett, you've been patiently waiting. I'm going to bring you on in. Hi, Brett. Are you there? Can you?
Hi.
Oh, great. Hello. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Is there something you wanted to address or speak to this evening?
Yeah, so just a little bit of introduction. So the town has hired Kirk and Company because it has become apparent over the last few years that the town has owned the White Cliffs Mansion, that there are a number of challenges to returning it to active use that are quite costly and somewhat overwhelming to the town officials and the White Cliffs Committee. So the White Cliffs Committee, in association with staff, have thought that it would be wise to put out an RFP, a request for proposals, to see if we could find either a private or a nonprofit partner to either take the property off the town's hands, subject to a preservation restriction, or partner with the town to return it to active use. So we went through a procurement process, and Kirk and Company rose to the surface as being the best consultant to help us with this process. And so Brett has been working with the White Cliffs Committee over the last couple of months or so on this process. And one of his introductory tasks is to find out what the townspeople would like to do with the White Cliffs Mansion. So that is why he is with us this evening, and also to give us an update on how things are going with this process. So take it away, Brett.
Thank you very much. That's a perfectly succinct description. What I wanted to do is make myself available to boards and commissions. I've been to the select board, the master, I've forgotten already.
Master Plan
Master Plan
Implementation Committee.
And I've got some more meetings scheduled for the coming weeks with Historic Commission and et cetera, et cetera. And basically just to bring everybody into the process that's involved in this in any way. And land use obviously is a major component to what goes on there in the future. And so, you know, we have been working together for now quite a few months. We have developed a pretty robust outreach program that's got I've made contact with about 50 or so industry professionals who either are real estate developers, operators of space, or what I'm calling adjacent professionals, which are lawyers and architects and historic tax credit folks and historic preservation folks and people who are, you know, connected to the adaptive reuse of historic buildings. I've gotten really good response and feedback from all of those groups. And so the goal in this exercise was not just to simply put an RFP out on the street and hope people responded, but to really bang on some doors and knock some people over the head a little bit to say, pay attention, because this is coming down the pike and you really should be interested in it, and get ready to respond. So we've had a tremendous amount of good feedback from people, which isn't to say that this isn't a challenge. It is a significant challenge, but I'm getting some good feeling about the conversations I have with people. And so we're developing an RFP. We're going to be talking about the draft RFP on Thursday with the White Cliffs Committee. And we're hoping to put the RFP out on the street sometime in October, leaving about 60-day window for responses and due diligence, and then go from there with the formal process. So I am happy to listen to anything anybody would like to say, or I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. And it's all helpful in sort of synthesizing all of these, you know, discrete and distant opinions and thoughts and ideas into a cohesive strategy going forward, which is what I think is essential to success in these sorts of things.
Great. I really appreciate you coming here tonight. Any comments or questions from board members?
I guess I have a question. What could the planning board do to help the process? You know, would it be, you know, changing some of the zoning in the area? Would it be, you know, changing some of the frontage? I mean, how can we help as a board?
Sure, a couple of things. The first is we have talked about this at the committee for months now, but in a public body going out to the market, seriousness of intent is really important. Being able to project that you're serious about getting this done and you're here to help and accommodate and do what you can. So I think being flexible and understanding as you go forward, and maybe even proactive once we find someone or some group that's going to be the end user or the developer, to say, you know, we're willing to work with you. We're willing to consider, you know, all sorts of different options, and be flexible, because we appreciate that the use is strange and this property is strange. But I think also Lori and I have discussed that this property sits straddling two zones, Business East and Residence C, I believe. And that is probably not great from a risk mitigation perspective. People that come in don't want to have to worry that they're going to be, you know, encumbered by uncertainty in a zoning process. So potentially, I think there was a discussion even previous to this conversation and the conversations that I've been involved in. There was a discussion of potentially of upzoning that entire parcel at some point in the future. And I think that would be well received. And I'd say, you know, of the people I have spoken to, only one person has indicated any interest in maintaining the property or converting the property into a single family or just a primary residence out of the 40 or 50 people I've spoken to. So I think it's more obvious of a solution is on the commercial or mixed use side.
Okay.
And the third thing is, you know, talking up and talking to people you know and people who are interested, and you may have either it's professional or a personal network of individuals that you can just mention things to. And I have been involved in so many transactions and deals where the end user or the successful bidder came out of nowhere, that I am a huge proponent of. Talk to everybody you can, even if you don't think they're going to be in the running, because they may know somebody or they may be, you know, the dark horse that you don't quite see coming.
Okay, thank you.
There's no formula for how this gets done, unfortunately. Most people like to see you put in a bunch of inputs and you make a spreadsheet, and at the end of it, you go through a process and it's done. It really is a little bit like alchemy. It's really hard to know exactly where people are going to come from and how they're going to find success, but we want to make sure we give them the opportunity to be creative and entrepreneurial and do that.
So I'm sure you've communicated with Lori about timing on our zoning bylaws. So we have our town meeting in April and we start to develop those, probably starting heavy maybe next month. So just keeping in mind as you go through your process, you know, what does that look like from a zoning perspective, and does anything need to come forward?
I think just that you probably want to upzone it to include the entire parcel as, at the very least, just paint it all Business East.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and
That would
Carrie,
be
I
my-
have already started putting together some of the zoning articles that we have discussed, and this is one that I have completed. So it's definitely on my top priority for getting done. And so that's something that I can discuss with you in more depth probably next month in October.
And I guess if we were to start to put it out there, what is the 30-second commercial that you would say that maybe we could replicate, or what's so appealing or exciting or interesting or anything?
You know, I'm bad at 30-second elevator pitches, but this really is a sort of what we in the business call a generational asset. These things don't come around but once every 100 years or so. And this property hasn't been really available for 50 or 60 years. You know, it's been locked up as a function facility, effectively the same ownership or two owners for quite a long time. And it's a remarkable asset, and then in a place where, and in a market where these large, relatively well kept and intact historic buildings are being demolished. This one stands tall, and it is in a prominent place in town on a great site. There's a lot to love about it. It's a challenge, but certainly there's a real groundswell for properties and experiences that are genuine and really remarkable. And the example I have been using is I spoke to someone who 2 years ago was operating at like a single table at a jam and jelly table at a farmer's market, and now is operating it's a 13 or 17 unit sort of experiential bed and breakfast where you can stay there and there's acreage. You can, go for a morning walk and feed the ducks and, take care of horses and go milk a cow and all these things that, us city folk like to pretend we're farmers for a weekend or something, and we'll pay $5 or $6 or $7 or $800 a night to do that. It is kind of incredible how that works, and that's in Rhode Island, and so even more far-flung market. But there's a groundswell for these sorts of things, and the more I see them, the more I get it. I don't quite understand how you get inspired to do that, but I don't really need to, but because these other people are out there taking the entrepreneurial route to doing those sorts of things. So, irreplaceable asset that has a tremendous amount of cultural and historic and community value, and it's quite large. You don't usually see them this. I think the building itself is, the mansion itself is almost 15,000 square feet, so it's quite a large structure. You usually get much smaller, or you get much bigger buildings, but they don't quite have the interiors as grand as this.
Great. Okay. Anything else from the board tonight? All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming tonight. Thank you so much.
And Lori's got my contact information if she can circulate it around. If anybody has any questions or comments, you can email me or call me anytime you'd like.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have the continued discussion of potential zoning bylaw amendments for 2023, including an update on final guidelines on multi-family zoning requirements for MBTA communities. So Lori, what do you recommend or I guess, did you want to start with maybe an update on the guidelines?
Well, like I said, I started putting that together. The town manager has asked me to also put together small wireless facility bylaw, or I shouldn't say a bylaw, it's policies and procedures for the Board of Selectmen. So that's something that I have been working on, which kind of made me set aside the zoning work that I had because he wants this sooner rather than later. So definitely busy on that front. As far as the MBTA guidelines are concerned, the updated final guidelines came out on August 10th, 2022. If you may recall, I provided a presentation to the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board back in April. And that was based on draft guidelines. They did end up making a number of changes to the guidelines, but the unfortunate thing is that they really didn't affect the town of Northborough. So as far as the town of Northborough is concerned, pretty much it is as it was proposed. There still is a requirement to zone an area consisting of at least 50 acres. You can have multiple different areas, but the smallest area can be no smaller than 5 acres. And the largest area can be, of course, the entire 50-acre piece, or you could do a 25-acre piece. You could do a couple of different locations in town. The density is consistent with what we talked about in April. It still is 15 units per acre. So the overall number of units that needs to be accommodated within the new overlay district, I'm assuming it's going to be an overlay district. It can be a regular district, but I would recommend the overlay, 750 units. So that has not changed. We are required to submit a kind of like an update document on January 31st of 2023. It's hard to remember the years because my life seems to be flashing before my eyes. But we need to comply by December 31st of 2024. So we have approximately a year and a half to comply, which is good, or actually 2 years. So if we don't get it done by this town meeting, we have another opportunity in April of 2023, April 2024 to get it done. So where the majority of the changes came into play was for communities that are adjacent communities that have a smaller population and don't have public utilities like the town of Northborough does. So an example of that would be like the town of Sutton. And so they no longer have the requirement for an area of 50 acres. They can make a much smaller area. They don't have the requirement of the 15 units per acre, because a lot of these communities that don't have public sewer were complaining that they can't possibly accommodate 15 units per acre on septic systems. So, you know, unfortunately, that doesn't help us out at all. But it is what ultimately was decided. So I have reached out to Central Mass Regional Planning. And now that we have the final guidelines, I said that we were interested in picking up the conversation again. Like I said, there's no rush. It doesn't have to be at the next town meeting if you would rather wait a year. But I would be interested in meeting with CMRPC to at least start the conversation and see what your priorities are, how you're feeling, so that both she and I will have some direction from you as to how you'd like to proceed.
Amy, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand up there.
Oh, I was just saying that, I don't know if we'll have a problem because we have public sewer, but not everywhere. And I think, isn't the town in a lawsuit about the public sewer because we don't have, Marlboro isn't allowing expansion, not 100%, but.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the goal is to have this type of density on public sewer. So that's certainly a conversation that we can have about the capacity. I'll follow up with Scott about that.
I mean, I think
So for that, sorry.
I do think it's worth a conversation of the pros and cons of becoming a MBTA community.
We are an MBTA community. So the pros and cons of compliance. So the con of, the pro of compliance is they will be eligible for grant money. So there are a lot of grants that are going to be tied to compliance. A perfect example of that is the MassWorks grant program. And the MassWorks grant is something that I am specifically looking at to fund downtown revitalization improvements. They're a great source of that type of money. So that's one of my major concerns, is that if we don't comply, then we're going to be shut out of MassWorks money. So the great thing about MassWorks money is that most grant programs have a mandatory match, and the MassWorks program does not. They like to see that the town has some skin in the game. So I have previously received 2 MassWorks grants. One was for the town of Groton. We were able to secure over $2 million in MassWorks funding to pay for a sewer expansion project. And the only thing that the town did as far as financing is concerned is pay for the design project. So that was significantly less. I want to say that was less than 200 grand. So that was our share. And then they came in with over I think it was $2.1 million to pay for the sewer expansion.
Is
And
Groton an MBTA community?
That was the town of Groton. So that was a
yeah.
wealthy community, of course. And the sewer capacity was extended from the town of Air.
But they're an MBTA community, Groton?
They are, but this has nothing to do with that. That was a few years ago.
Uh-huh.
So then, the way it works is that you comply with the multifamily requirements as part of Chapter 40A in order to be eligible for this grant money. So if we don't comply, then we're shut out. So we're not eligible to apply.
For the multifamily, under the multifamily one, or?
So the multifamily requirement that says that you have to have zoning. So you don't have to produce any multifamily units, but you have to have a zoning district that allows a density of 15 units per acre, and it needs to cover an area of at least 50 acres. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all undeveloped land. So you can include developed land within that 50-acre area. You just have to demonstrate that you have the capacity between built structures and open space to be able to accommodate up to 750 dwelling units. Doesn't necessarily have to be multifamily, has to be single family, 2-family, 3-family, high-rise garden style, through the combination of all the various types of housing units. You have to just have the ability to get to 750 units.
Okay.
So the negative of not complying is being shut out of these grant programs. That's really the major negative.
Right. So I guess I'm just a little confused because Groton wasn't an MBTA community, but they got that grant.
So this was a number of years ago. I used to work for the town of Groton. And so this was back in 2016. I was able to get that grant. So that was long before this change to Chapter 40A that is requiring this multifamily zoning district.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because it would seem that you would be able to get some of those grants without becoming a member, but without being compliant. I mean, there's got to be a downside in some ways of compliance, and that's what I'm trying to evaluate before we go through a lot of effort that may or may not be as beneficial to us as we'd like.
So, of course, the negative is that if you don't want to have additional housing developments, then this is opening the door. So this is opening the door to a greater density of development than currently exists within the town. So right now you have Avalon.
Yep.
So that density is about 9 dwelling units per acre.
Really?
So that was a Chapter 40B development. So the reason why it's so dense is because they didn't have to comply with the underlying zoning. So what this would do is it would create a zoning district of high density But that doesn't mean that you're actually going to get a developer to develop at that density. Like, for example, we may create this zoning district, and then somebody may purchase a 20-acre parcel within the district and say, well, I don't want to develop at 15 units per acre. I want to develop at 10 units per acre. So that's what they submit, and there's no penalty for that. So the only thing that the state is requiring is us to create the opportunity to build to this density. They're not mandating that you actually build to this density, if that makes any sense.
It does, but then I guess my concern is that you get somebody who does build to that density, and then you've overwhelmed the schools, you've overwhelmed some of the other things that are sort of a trickle down effect from having that zoning.
And that is a risk.
Yeah.
That is a risk. So, you know, one of the things that you could do, like I said, is you could rezone an area that's pretty much already built. And then so I'm not suggesting that the entire area is built, but say we have this 50-acre requirement. What we could do is we could say, okay, well, we're going to use Avalon development, 20 acres of the Avalon development. So, you know, certainly I know, and you know, that it's unlikely that they're going to demolish 20 acres of Avalon in order to create more density, but they may find that they can accommodate more units at the Avalon development. I'm not sure. I did look to see, and, you know, there are some steep slopes, but, you know, there are certain things you can do. Like one of the thoughts I had is that there is a mill building within walking distance to the downtown that I don't want to identify right now, that could someday be converted from its current use into multifamily housing. So it could just be like an adaptive reuse of this mill building. And so, you know, we could put the density of 15 units per acre, but they might actually be able to accommodate more than 15 units per acre because it's an adaptive reuse. So some flexibility in the overlay is something that I'd be interested in. But if you go at a greater density in the mill building, you know, then you could offset that with a lesser density somewhere else. So all they're saying is that cumulatively, they want a density of 15 units per acre. So you could say, okay, well, over here on this 5 acres, we're going to make it 20 units per acre. And then over here on this other 5 acres, we're going to make it 10 units per acre. Well, cumulatively, when you add the 10 acres together, you have 15 units per acre. See what I'm saying? So there are all different ways to skin this cat. So, you know, I think it's worth the conversation anyway. And then we can see where it goes. But it's probably going to be a lengthier conversation than, you know, 15 minutes at a planning board meeting. It might have to be, we dedicate an hour to it and really kind of flesh it out, like have like a working session type thing.
Anthony, did you have your hand up? I saw you.
Yeah, so the first question I have is, I thought we could use Avalon as a credit, meaning subtract the units from the 750. Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, so the way it goes is, so if we're going to submit, say the area, we're going to use a portion of the Avalon site because that's 42 acres. So overall, we have 50 acres mandated. So we can use a portion of the Avalon development and then another area. So maybe we would want to use a parcel that's adjacent to the Avalon development or across the street from the Avalon development. I don't know. We're just supposing. So the important thing is that ultimately we have to go through the exercise to say that we can accommodate 750 units. So we can use the credit of how many dwelling units currently exist within Avalon, and we can include that within the analysis.
So it's not net new 750. It would be Avalon.
So right now Avalon has, gosh, what is it, 360 units? Fred, you probably know off the top of your head.
I thought it was 392.
It's somewhere in that ballpark, but
Actually, I think I have it in this presentation I had printed out just in case. It's 368 units.
There you go.
So what we could do is, yeah, I mean, we could, the one concern that I have is that we have to be able to accommodate more than 15 units per acre elsewhere in order to do the calculation, or we have to assume that they are going to increase the density on the Avalon parcel. That's for the analysis sake. We don't have to, Avalon certainly doesn't have to increase their density. They can stay exactly the way they are. But for the calculation that the state is looking for.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm trying to get to, and if this isn't obvious to me and everything is to everybody else, so we've got to do 750 net new and not consider Avalon at all. Now, I'm not saying, okay, if Avalon increases their footprint, but we do need 750 new units or plan for it. Okay,
yes,
that's right. Okay.
Or but not necessarily new. That's the combination of the built and the new 750.
Total.
Correct.
So you could do the 750 minus the 368.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought, but yeah.
Okay, and then the net, I mean, from your experience, I mean, I would imagine we would have to do an impact study because the impact on, and just as Millie was saying, even this year with the school impact is pretty significant. And that would, you know, I can't even think of any major development that could have caused that other than families, newer families coming to town. So like, you'd have to do this at a very macro level, like, okay, what is the schools going to do? What police going to do? What's fire going to do? What's traffic going to be impacted? I mean, there's so much around that.
Right.
So it's kind of like a build out analysis. I don't know if you folks have gone through that exercise in the past, but at the regional planning agencies, so the state paid for build out analyses for all Massachusetts communities back in the early 2000s. And at the time I used to work for regional planning agencies. So I got to work on like 25 of them. And so I'm very, very familiar with build out analyses. And essentially it's an academic exercise. So right now you have your existing zoning districts, and I could do a build out analysis for the entire town, the way it is currently zoned. And I could tell you what the impacts will be on the community as far as the schools, as far as water consumption, sewage, and the like. So that exercise isn't a heavy lift. And absolutely, that's something that we can do. The important thing to remember is this is a zoning exercise. So it's not an actual development that's proposed. And there's no timeline set that says, okay, you know, within the next 10 years, you have to build 750 or 350 or whatever number of units. It's just saying that at some point over the next 300, 400, 500 years, this is something that the town of Northborough could eventually get to.
Right.
I have a question on what they're defining as units. What actually is a unit?
So a dwelling unit is, multifamily dwelling unit is essentially anything that accommodates 3 or more units. So it's a structure that contains 3 or more units. So a duplex, of course, is 2 units and a single family is 1. But it's not mandating that it has to be all multifamily. What it's mandating is that you would have to allow it could be a combination of single family, 2-family, and multifamily.
So something like Coleman House or Whitney Place aren't considered units? Even
No,
though
those are considered units.
Okay.
I would consider those units, absolutely.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because they have, correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that those assisted living facilities, they are housekeeping units. So they have kitchens, they have bathrooms. So it's not like communal, everybody goes down to the cafeteria and they eat. They're each like, it's like a little apartment.
Yeah, some of them are. I'd be curious to see what their density is there.
Yeah,
So
I
is
did
that-
actually. So I checked the housing authority units behind the library.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, no, actually 238 West Main Street, which I believe is called Whitney Place.
That's Whitney Place. I was curious. Yeah.
It contains 171 units on 7.4 acres. So that works out to 24 units per acre.
Okay.
So that's what you're looking at. And then if you look at the housing authority units behind the library
Mm-hmm.
and an abutting parcel. So this had to do with what the proposal was at town meeting last year. That was withdrawn. So they wanted to build another 8-unit building.
Yeah, they didn't get the funding.
Right. So I did a little calculation and figured out that they could ultimately accommodate 102 units have that project been built. That would be on less than 6 acres. So that would be 17 units per acre.
Okay, interesting.
So we do already have areas in town that have a huge density already. So when you combine the properties together, so
Yeah.
say we just wanted to include those 3 properties,
Mm.
Avalon, Whitney Place, and the housing authority properties, that could create an overall density of 12 units per acre spread over 56 acres. So, yeah.
So beyond the grants, like 40B, for example, when you don't meet your 40B, you lose your zoning and people can do kind of whatever they want. You kind of alluded to that's the same if we just decided we didn't want to do this at all or comply. Is it a similar situation as 40B where they can come in and somebody could do whatever they wanted or not?
So the way it currently is, the only hammer is the grants.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean that doesn't change in the future. Of course, we're going to get another governor. Who knows what the governor's priorities will be. So that could change in the future. But right now, the only hammer that I am aware of is the grants.
Yes. Okay.
Bill, did you have something? I thought you interjected there.
I just, so one of the things, I think if I remember correctly, and Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, or if this changed, but we also have to be careful of the type of housing, right? It has to be for families. It can't be for, 55 plus or anything like that. Is that still a requirement?
Yeah, it's correct. So what they don't want is they don't want you to put specific requirements on there that would preclude families. So it doesn't say that you have to mandate that it's for families. It just says that you can't You can't say that you're only going to accept 1 and 2 bedroom units. You have to leave it flexible. And you can't say that the only people who can live in these developments are 55 and over.
Yeah.
So,
What about- so what about like-
it could be 55 and over. You just can't mandate that it's 55 and over.
Right. So does that include like assisted living facilities as well?
Well, that's a good point. I think that, like I said, the zoning itself can't mandate it. But if somebody purchases 20 acres of your 50-acre overlay district and they decide that they want to put a nursing home there, then that's the development.
Right.
So your zoning isn't specifying one way or the other. That's just what you're ending up with. So if, for example, our overlay district says, that this is the density that you're going to allow, and somebody decides that they want to put up a, 10-unit luxury single-family home development, then that's fine. And that's what the property owner decided that they wanted to do. And so it's just approved the same way any other subdivision would be approved. So there's no mandate of how to build.
And then the other thing is that in these if in this overlay district, then they're able to build almost by right.
It is by right, but it can be subject to site plan review.
Right. So we lose some ability to be able to control what gets built in that area as well. So if they wanted to build a 60 level, a third, I remember this happening in Worcester, that in the center of Worcester, they built this skyscraper in the middle of Worcester for housing, and they built it without consulting the fire department, who then realized they didn't have a ladder to get up to the top of the building in case something happened. But the building was built and people were living in it. So, I understand that wouldn't happen here. I'm just saying that, you have to be real careful with what you're allowing and what rules are.
So the district itself, so like I said, I envision this as being an overlay district. So the overlay district would specify all that stuff. So it would specify your maximum height. It would specify the distance between buildings. It would specify the frontage requirements. It would specify design standards. So it would just be like a regular zoning district. So the only thing, so if you wanted to say that, this has to go through design review, you can specify that. If you want to say that 10% of the units have to be affordable housing, you can specify that. Or you can, not specify that, and they can all be, luxury units. So you do have that power through site plan review. The only difference between a special permit process and site plan review is you're removing the discretion. So when it's a special permit process, first of all, it's a supermajority vote. And secondly, you have more discretion to say no just because you don't want it. When it's site plan approval, if they comply with all of your requirements, you have to approve it. The discretion is taken away. And instead of it being a supermajority vote, it's a majority vote.
Right. But we also have to remember that there's an intent behind this bill. And, just because we put those requirements in there doesn't mean the state is going to say you can use that overlay district or you cannot. Right? They still have that ultimate authority to say this overlay district doesn't work with what we're trying to accomplish here. And so therefore you can't use it as part of your count.
Yes. So what we would do if the town does decide to go forward with this type of bylaw is we would submit a draft to the state in advance of town meeting, just to make sure that it's something that they're going to accept. I definitely don't want to go through the exercise of going through town meeting and possibly getting an overlay district approved that doesn't meet the standard that they're looking for and gets kicked. That's like my worst nightmare. So absolutely, we would send it to the state in advance to make sure it's okay. And they are expecting that. So that's actually written into, they provide technical assistance. So they're funding technical assistance for communities to help communities comply with the new requirements. And then they said that that's specifically something that they are going to fund is, submitting it to them for their advance approval.
And we actually got funding from CMRPC for that technical assistance on this bylaw, didn't we? We got the, you wrote.
Yeah, so I have told them that we want to go through them. So instead of actually submitting like the grant paperwork, I said, hey, let's just make it easy on ourselves and use Central Mass.
Okay, so what would the right next step be? It sounds like maybe, at least at a minimum, we explore and hear from them. Is it something we just would schedule a meeting with them for?
Yeah, so I reached out to Jane. So Jane's the one who gave the presentation back in April. So I reached out to her and I said, pretty much what you said, what's the next step? We want to continue with the conversation. So she said that she wanted to schedule a meeting with the planning board to discuss. So if you're on board with that, right now we have a couple of items scheduled for our October 4th meeting, but we don't have anything scheduled for our second meeting in October. So I can set aside a good chunk of time on the second meeting in October if that's something that you'd be okay with.
Sound good to the board for a second meeting in October? Hear a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
Fine.
Okay.
Okay, so that's October 18th.
And then for our other bylaw amendments, is that something that we also should look at that time, or the October 4th meeting, or what do you suggest for that?
We could just make October 8th. I mean, unless we end up getting a submission, but we could earmark that to discuss the rest of the zoning as well, if you'd like.
Okay, does that sound okay with the board? And in the interim, do you need any input from us at all, or?
Not yet.
Okay, and one other thing I wanted to, I know you mentioned you're working on the cell tower item. Is it possible, I don't even think it's our bylaws, I think it maybe is the town charter, to talk about the merits of the Mullins rule? And if we can.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely am interested in having the town adopt that. It adds some unnecessary stress at the last minute, not having adopt that bylaw. So what the Mullins rule allows you to do is if you miss a meeting, they're all on Zoom anyway, you can just watch the meeting at your leisure. You can review the materials that were part of the meeting package. And then when you vote on a decision where you missed a meeting, you read a statement saying that you viewed the videotape and that you've reviewed all of the materials received at the meeting that you missed, and you sign it. And I attach that to the decision. So it really is a simple thing, and it means that planning board members that miss one session of a public hearing will still be able to vote on a project.
And are we the board that brings that forward if it's not a zoning bylaw? Or is that a board of, who brings this forward?
I think anybody can bring it forward. I'd already kind of laid the groundwork with John a while ago. So I can talk to him and say that this is something that the planning board is interested in having the town adopt. and submit something formal, or is that okay?
Yeah, how does the board feel about that rule in general? Does that seem like something that would be helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, my only concern would be someone taking advantage of it and, you know, never showing up for a meeting, but.
You're only allowed to miss one.
Oh, okay, so there's a limit?
Yeah, so if you're going through a public hearing and you miss one session, you'd still be eligible to vote. If you miss two, you are not eligible to vote.
And that's one per hearing, not one total, one per public hearing. Okay.
It's one per application. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Sometimes I definitely stress about if you miss something, if you're not gonna be able to vote, what'll happen, and especially if we have those hearings where super majorities.
Yeah.
That's hard. Okay, anything else to discuss on zoning bylaw amendments then for this evening?
I just have one question. So, Lori, this has come up the last 2 years now with parcels that are in two different zoning districts, right? It came up with, what was it, 39 South Street this past year, and now with the White Cliffs. Can we try to identify it, how many of those are actually in town, and try to fix some of these before they become problems that we then have to address?
Sure. It's probably a very.
I know it's a lot of work and you may not get it done for this year, but I think it's something that we really should address before, like I said, before they become problems.
I can put that on the list. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think they tried to do it in 2009, but they missed some, but.
I mean, at some point, I feel like we need a big look at the entire book and just go through the process of, what do we call it when we go through the entire zoning book?
Codification.
Yes. I mean, are we at that, not this year, obviously, but are we at that point, you think? I mean, Laurie, coming in from the outside and looking at this, like, are we at a point where that makes sense, or every X number of years we should be doing it anyway?
You know, it's not uncommon to do tweaks. I think overall the zoning book is in really good shape. There are some idiosyncrasies about it that I think we can correct as they come up. But I don't think we're to that point. I think overall the structure is good. And you just went through that process in 2009. So that's usually something that you go through, you know, less frequently. So maybe 20 or 30 year time frame would be a good time to go through it comprehensively. But yeah, there's definitely some idiosyncrasies that I think are confusing. And, you know, Fred and I have discussed the groundwater overlay district. There's a couple of things in there that I think need to be clarified so that they're more user friendly. And the goal, of course, is to stay out of trouble if we possibly can. So I think it would be worthwhile to go through that exercise.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about on those lines? You know, we have issues where the industrial zone butts up right next to a residential. What do towns do to sort of mitigate some of those issues? Do they do zoning in between somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's often a good idea to have transitional uses. So you don't want to have industry and residents right button up against each other. Right. There are some exceptions. Like multifamily housing tends to be a bit more tolerant to being in more industrial, as long as it's light industry and commercial locations. But single family homes tend to be less tolerant.
Right.
You know, multifamily tends to be more transitional.
Right.
But also it's a good idea to have industry, then commercial, then residential.
Right.
But it doesn't always work out that way. So, but we can certainly look at the zoning map to see if where we have potential. One of the things we had talked about previously is this multifamily MBTA business has potential for us to identify undeveloped land that's currently zoned for industry that probably is going to be a problem because of its proximity to single family homes.
Right.
So that could be an opportunity to transition to multifamily.
Okay.
For example.
Yeah, I'd love to take a look at where that might be optional.
Okay.
Okay, great. Moving on to review of draft design guidelines for two-family dwellings. Is that something, Amy, is that you speaking to, or?
That is me, but I don't know if the board had time to read it over. We worked on them with the design review committee to come up with some two-family design review guidelines. But what we really wanted was just input from the board. We think you're in a great place. But if you want to read them over and then come back with any questions, or if you wanted to add something, just to let me know, we could talk about it. I don't know if anyone had time to read them.
Did everyone get a chance to read them? I'm sorry, Amy, I personally did not. In fact, I missed them in the.
I did not.
I did not either.
I didn't see them.
Yeah, I didn't see them either.
When did you
Right,
send
maybe
that?
they didn't get sent out. Maybe we didn't send them.
No, I'm pretty sure I sent them, but I think I sent them about a week ago. What I try to do is try to email you things as they come up. Just so that if somebody is bored and they're looking at the planning email and it's 3 weeks before the meeting, you can take a jump on it.
Hey.
But the negative of that is things might get lost in the shuffle. So I'd be happy to email those out again. And I can, another part of the problem is, of course, I was thinking about this, you know, of course, I put it under old new business. And that's such a lengthy section that I think it's easy for stuff to get lost there. So maybe if we're going to discuss something, how about if I bold it? Will that make it easier for you to see that this is going to be a discussion item and you need to do homework?
Sure, that sounds fine.
Okay.
We had so many public hearings tonight. I didn't think anyone would have time anyways. But it's good because it's on the agenda and we can review it next time.
Okay, so our homework is to review the draft design guidelines for two-family dwellings for the next meeting, 10/4.
Yeah.
Okay. Minutes from August 16th. Did everyone have a chance to read the amended minutes?
Yep.
Okay. Any additional edits or amendments to the minutes?
I just had a question for Fred. I added this, I had a little paragraph in there and I was calling out the Whitney Street Bridge. And did you say that was owned by the state or it's a Mass DOT bridge?
It's I should have been more clear. It's a Mass DOT inspected bridge. It's a town road. The bridge is in town, but because it exceeds 10 feet in clearance, it's reviewed by the state, and the state is the one who posted the re-rating on the bridge due to some deficiencies in the structure.
Okay. Well, I think in the minutes I wrote Mass DOT bridge, so that it
Matt,
fits that.
all I would suggest is that you insert the word inspected after Mass DOT. So
Okay.
they don't own the bridge, we own it, but they inspected it as a matter of course of any bridge over 10 foot in span. So
I can add that new language.
Okay.
just a one word would be fine, I think.
All right. Thanks.
And I did check the signs regarding the posting of the bridge. And there
Yeah.
are two on the southerly side of the bridge. Unfortunately, one is just prior to Barefoot Road as you're coming up Whitney Street. So if you come up Barefoot Road and you go to turn right, you wouldn't see it. And then there's another one before Coolidge Circle, so that people could turn around there if they had to. And then coming the other way, there's only one, and for some reason it's posted right at the bridge. I would think it'd be down by the rotary, but it's not. Mass DOT put those signs up on their own, not realizing, I'm sure, that there's a 5-ton truck exclusion on Whitney Street, so there wouldn't be anybody to see that potentially before you get to Barefoot Road. And then after you come from Barefoot Road, you wouldn't see it until you get to Coolidge.
Would it take Mass DOT to move the sign? Because I actually drove it the other day before I did the minutes again. And I didn't even notice the one on Barefoot Road. I did what you said. I drove all the way to Barefoot and I looked.
It's
and
not
it's
on
there.
Barefoot, it's on Whitney prior to Barefoot. So if you're coming from the center of town on Whitney,
Oh,
it's on Whitney Street. And so the theory I would assume is that if you're on Whitney Street and you're over 6 tons, you should turn right onto Barefoot. But if you're on Whitney Street and you're over 6 tons, you shouldn't be there to begin with. Because of
Right.
because of the truck exclusion.
but if
So-
you're on Barefoot, then you're automatically going to turn right and then get to Coolidge and go, oh no.
Right.
Yeah,
You gotta go
so
down to
I
the
can,
nuance.
they have to move it, but I can talk to them about moving it up Whitney Street just a little bit further, so it's somewhere between Barefoot and the 290 overpass, so that's right there.
Yeah.
There's a driveway there, we don't want to block it, but somewhere in that location, so the driver would see it if he's about to turn right.
Yeah, maybe right next to the other one. I don't know. So they don't already turn.
I'll talk to them, but it's not something that happens quickly.
Right. All right. Thanks.
Okay, so in regard to how that impacts the minutes, there's a minor change in that section about Mass DOT ownership, and Laura, you have that covered. Okay, any other proposed amendments to the minutes? Okay, is there a motion to accept the minutes from August 16th as amended?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, Anthony,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Millie? Aye. Carries an aye. Minutes are approved. Complete Streets Public Input Session, October 3rd. Is this just a notification to mention or?
That's it. It's a notification. And so that's going to be at the Board of Selectmen meeting on October 3rd. So hopefully everybody can attend and provide us with your feedback.
Okay, great. So that is Complete Streets Public Input Session, October 3rd at the Board of Selectmen meeting.
And I'm happy to announce that we received 808 responses to that Complete Streets survey.
Awesome.
So thank you to everybody who filled that out. That's awesome.
That's great. Amy, you had something?
Oh, I was just gonna say that the MPIC too, last week discussed Complete Streets, and there are 24 projects that were on a list. And we narrowed it down to our top 10. I didn't know, Lori, before the October 3rd, would other people get a list of the projects or?
What we're hoping for is people will come to the Complete Streets public input session. So instead of having different community input sessions at every single committee, we just prefer that everybody come to that one and provide their feedback.
Okay.
Anything else on Master Plan Implementation Committee? It looks like the next meeting is the 20th. Anything else?
There's a survey that was submitted. So Weston and Sampson actually came to the farmers market at Apple Fest this weekend. And before they came, the Master Plan Implementation Committee reviewed a survey. And the survey was handed out at Apple Fest, and it's online on the town website. It's right on the front page. And
Yes.
it's gonna be online until the beginning of November. And it's also available at the library and the senior center?
It's available at the town hall
Oh,
and
it's
the
not-
library. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
and
those
I'm gonna
files-
do a press release and have that included within the newspaper. That's one of my tasks for this week. So I'm gonna send out the link to all the various folks on my email list. So if you could look for that over the next day or so. And please forward that to everybody you know who lives in the town of Northborough. So we're hoping to match the 808 responses we got on the Complete Streets survey. So
Great. Okay.
if you could also share it on the Facebook pages, that'd be nice.
And this is
And
for
now-
downtown revitalization, if I didn't say that.
Yep, and I've seen it posted around in a couple places already. The Northborough Guide covered it, so it's definitely out there getting some traction. I'll
Okay.
also say, Lori, I don't know if you have the benefit of being a part of any of the Northborough pages, but there are quite a few comments about how beautiful the planters are.
Oh, my God.
Oh, good,
So
good.
thank you for that and your team who went and did that extra work and got the funds and made it beautiful. It's awesome. I think people noticed and loved it.
Happy to do it, and thank you to Amy for all of her help. And we had a couple of other ladies who helped with the planting and with the soil mitigation. So the assistance was greatly appreciated.
That's awesome.
And of course, the DPW.
Yes, they were
Yeah,
very
I have
helpful.
to give a hearty thank you to the DPW for placing the pots and for filling them with water. These are special pots that have a reservoir that holds 30 gallons of water. So they only need to be filled once a week during the hottest days of summer. But that requires a water truck, and I know that's a pain for the DPW. So I definitely want to extend my thank you to them for their cooperation and participation.
Oh, well, that's great. Thank you. It looks like we have a performance guarantee release for 454 and 469 Whitney Street.
You know, I'm sorry, that is, we probably kept that from a prior meeting.
Okay,
I don't think we have a performance guarantee release for tonight,
okay.
right, Fred?
Did you do it last month? There was a property at the corner of Whitney Street and Whitney Ave. That originally was gonna have two buildings on it a number of years ago. And they posted a bond for the development. And I think that was the period of time when the earthwork board bonds were being issued by the planning board in accordance with site plan review. So they had a plan, they had two buildings they were gonna put up. They never went forward. They posted the bond to get started on the earthwork. They subsequently came back and developed the first portion of the building, which is at the intersection of Whitney and Whitney Ave. And that's where JR Institute is, JRI, the daycare, adult daycare. Anyways, the time they developed that site and they got the money released from that site, but they kept the other one in place, thinking that they might go forward, but they did not. There was some disturbed soil that has been since seeded and stabilized. So I believe there was something that was remaining there. I think it was a $6,000 bond or something from a number of years ago that needed to be released.
Okay, I don't have the exact amount ready for you, so why don't we carry this forward to the October 4th meeting?
Okay, there's no time restriction, like I know with Newton Street, we had a certain number of days or whatever the case, but this is just no time restriction.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay, so we'll do that for next time. Any subcommittee updates from anybody? All right, so we have our next planning board meeting October 4th. And what do we have coming up in there? Obviously, we have, looks like 100 was continued. Anything else? Anything coming on the 4th for us?
Yes, we have a new public hearing that's going to be starting. It is an earth disturbance public special site plan approval. And that's for a property that's on Crawford Street. So they're disturbing just shy of 1 acre of land.
Okay. Anything else that's on the radar for the 4th? That's it? Okay. One other thing too, I forgot to mention so I did draft that letter to the Board of Selectmen about the traffic. We were going to summarize the traffic meeting, and I just sent that to go to the planning board. So maybe also for homework next month or in a couple weeks is just to take a look at that. And if anyone has comments to submit back to Lori. So that was basically when we had public input. I know we just had a recent flurry of emails that have come in lately about the traffic issues. So it just reminded me that I had to draft that letter, and I did that for the board review.
Sounds good.
Next ZBA meeting is the 27th. One thing I noted on the agenda for them was they had put on their possible joint meeting discussion about bylaws. That was on for the 27th. So I guess, Lori, with you being, you are part of the last joint meeting we had with the ZBA. Were you part of that meeting?
Yes, it was very late. So it may have been when I first started, or it might have been one of the meetings that I observed right before I started work here. But it was very late in the process. So one of the things that I discussed with the ZBA is the fact that we are starting on the zoning package earlier with the intent of finalizing the zoning well in advance of March. So we were discussing that it would be better to have the meeting possibly in January instead of, or even earlier than that, instead of having that meeting in March or February.
Okay. So, and board members, feel free to chime in. So from my perspective, I am still open to having that joint meeting, but I want to better manage some upfront expectations of that in terms of making sure that we understand our respective roles. And I think we've had a couple of years where some of the ZBA, I think, crosses the line in terms of who has the authority to create bylaws ultimately. And I do believe that's the planning board. So really, we're looking for, when it impacts the ZBA and certainly their input, but I think we need to be mindful as we go into town meeting that we can't have instances where the ZBA takes a perceived role of, I guess what I'm trying to say, I don't mean to say level playing field, but it's really the planning board's authority to propose these bylaws to the town. It's not the role of the ZBA, and I just want to be mindful of how we present to when we go to town meeting. It shouldn't be ZBA members coming up to the mic or things like that, or trying to make, we want to make recommendations to the town based on how we vote. And certainly I think some ZBA members do get that and have been mindful. I think Paul is the chair. Is Paul still the chair?
Yes. Yes.
Paul has always specifically been mindful of that. So I think maybe that'll hopefully set a new tone. But as you participate in this meeting, talking about the joint meeting, maybe if you can just help the board kind of set expectations and roles, maybe a little bit more defined. So we don't get into those sort of what looks to the public to be arguments that really aren't necessarily arguments at all. So I don't know, board members, do you know what I'm trying to say here? Am I being clear? Would you add to that or expand, or does that cover?
I think that's appropriate for the ZBA members to express their opinions because they are residents. So they have just as much right as anybody else does to express their opinions about various proposals that are before the town meeting. So I certainly don't want to convey to them that they don't have that right and that power. But generally, certainly the recommendation before the town meeting is the planning board. So the planning board recommends on all proposed zoning related articles. But anybody can submit an article. So it could be a petition article. It could be something proposed by the building inspector or the ZBA. So anybody has the power to submit an article, to create an article and submit it. But the planning board is the only entity that can provide the formal recommendation on every single warrant article that's zoning related.
So I agree. I think the problem we run into is when the ZBA wants to make their own recommendation. And I think that's what causes confusion to the public and just sort of blurs the line. So that's just the area that I think we could get a little better at, so that we can sit at the table together and talk about the bylaws and certainly take input, but it shouldn't be ZBA then wants to vote on their own and make their own recommendations. So those are the times where we run into trouble.
Yes, that happened 1 year or 2 years.
Yes. So it keeps happening and we keep forging ahead with this joint meeting anyway, in the spirit of collaboration. And it's unfortunate when it backfires, when the spirit of collaboration turns into something that was not intended to, we go in good faith. So I would just ask that the ZBA come in good faith as well. And I think most of them do. So. All right, any other items? I think that concludes our business. Okay, if there's no other business, then is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, Millie?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Bill?